So good evening, everyone, and welcome to How to Make the Interview Shortlist webinar. For those who don't know me, I am an interview and career coach with 14, 15 years of recruitment and coaching experience. Whilst I have recruited mostly for global technology and e-commerce companies, as an interview coach, I've worked with hundreds, probably over 1,000 people right now in different sectors, public sector and private sectors, and local governments and NGOs, and a lot of different corporate jobs. So hopefully, the examples I'm going to use today are going to help you no matter what industry you are in. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today, we talk about different job search methods. I will explain in quite a lot of detail what recruiters are looking for on a resume. When I say resume and CV, I mean the same things. I mean, in case someone is from the States on the call, I know we use CV in Europe. In the States, we use resume. I think a CV in the States is quite a different thing, but I'll be using CV and resume interchangeably. I will also talk about how to quantify your experience on your CV, and I'll give you some examples, and how to create an achievement-oriented resume, because that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see as a recruiter that job seekers make, that the CV is very much duty-oriented, but doesn't really talk enough about the impact of what the person has achieved. Again, I'll give you some examples of why you need to tailor your resume to a specific role. I will show you also an example of a CV of a resume that I think is very strong, and why it's strong as well. So there will be a specific example as well. But also, before I talk about the job search methods, I wanted to talk a little bit about like the proper mindset for conductive and effective job search. While you shouldn't let technology rule your search, you should kind of use it to enhance your relationship building activities to gain traction for the right jobs for you. Because what a lot of people are doing, they are submitting to job postings and not talking to people, and that's not an effective job search strategy. I'm not saying that you can't get a job from applying online. Of course you can. I got jobs like that way, and as a recruiter, we love it when a good person applies for the position. But as I'm sure you have seen in your job search, whether now or in the past, sometimes you can be the best candidate and have really relevant experience, and you still won't get an interview. And there are so many different reasons for that. It might be that they have already someone on a final interview stage by the time you apply. It might be that they have candidates recommended for the position, or internal candidates that they are interviewing in the first instance. So a lot of people, they just, apply on job boards. And I'm not saying stop doing that, but that's not the most effective method of job search. And if that's all you are doing, you honestly could be waiting for a very long time. So again, I'll give you some tips on what else to do in terms of looking for a position. So let's just look at, different job search methods. So firstly, in terms of networking, research shows that 50 to 70% of jobs are filled via networking. And then that, staffing firms and advertising accounts for just 20% of people finding jobs through that method. For executives, networking is really a #1 way in which people are getting hired. So the more people who you've worked with who can recommend you and who can vouch for you, honestly, the better. I got quite a lot of, I've been contracting, doing recruitment work for the last 4 years. And 2 or 3 out of these contracts were actually through my network. People who just knew me, they were happy to recommend me, or they were happy to hire me again on a contract basis. Whereas sometimes I speak to people who've been looking for work for a long time, and when I ask them, okay, well, who did you share that you're looking for work? And they're like, well, their family and maybe friends know. But in terms of networking, you really should have a list of people who you can contact. So firstly, your previous bosses, who can potentially recommend you to other opportunities. Previous colleagues, previous clients. I can hear my voice as an echo. Can you hear me, Gail? Is it okay? I could just suddenly hear my voice as an echo. So I would really recommend that you try to network to get the job. And I will talk about other job search methods in a moment, but networking, that could mean a lot of different things. So firstly, it's contacting people who you have worked with, who can potentially recommend you for some jobs, or at least who can keep you in mind when a specific position becomes available. And again, when you are contacting someone, mention specifically what you're interested in. Because if you mention, oh, I'm interested in a job in sales, well, that's not very specific. Whereas if you mention, I have, 5 years of experience in software sales and I'm looking for a job within a US software company, it's much more easier to place you and remember if a relevant opportunity becomes available. By networking, I also mean if you see an opportunity, let's say you see a job on LinkedIn or on Indeed or Glassdoor or any other job board, try to find out who the hiring manager is for the position. I know it's absolutely not always possible, especially if it's a global company with loads of different stakeholders and loads of different hiring managers, but often you can try to find out who the hiring manager is. So let's say you are a business analyst, and normally you would report to head of analytics or analytics director. Just try to find out on LinkedIn who the head of analytics or analytics director is in a specific company. And then again, you can just send them a message that you're interested in this specific job and, just concisely kind of, sell yourself if they are the right person to contact. Networking can also mean, trying to conduct some informational interviews. And I think now it's really a perfect time to do that. So ideally, you should have a list of your target companies that interest you, that you would like to work there. Definitely set up some Google alerts for these companies, LinkedIn alerts, follow them on LinkedIn. And you can also set up Google alerts for the leadership within a company. Because then when when there's something in the news about the specific people in the organization, you can hopefully network with them or, congratulate them on something and, hopefully build a relationship that way. Also, if you know of someone who's working for a specific company, or even if you don't know them, you can still contact people who you don't know. But I would definitely recommend that even if there are no openings on the careers website of the companies that interest you, still try to connect with potential decision makers or recruiters so that you've got some point of contact when a job becomes available. I've actually just posted on LinkedIn, literally like an hour ago, an article on how to get the hiring manager to respond to you. Now, of course, you can't guarantee that, but you can increase your chances of the hiring manager responding to you. So if you connect with me on LinkedIn, or just Margaret Buj, I think there's just one, have a look at my article, just literally recent article. If you can't find it, send me an email or send me a message on LinkedIn. I will send you a link, but it's literally posted earlier on today. And I give there a template that you can use, to connect to the hiring manager and what kind of things you can say to get them to respond to you. And you do need to do some research first, to really get the response. So when you contact people on LinkedIn, it's very important that you don't just ask strangers for a job. It's very, very off-putting. I sometimes get people contacting me and they haven't even clearly read my profile because they are just asking about jobs that I've never ever recruited for or in industries that I've never ever recruited for. So the best approach is to leverage common interest as opposed to asking for a job, because most people won't be able to help you directly, but they might be able to help you indirectly. People are usually willing to help, even those that you don't know particularly well. So when networking, and I think I actually have it on the next slide, but I will come back to that. You can ask, what the company is like to work for. You can try to find out how they see the industry and what's going on in the industry. Like, let's say you are now in an industry that has been really affected by COVID-19. Again, you can message someone in an industry that interests you and just send a short message and mention that there are, there've been a lot of redundancies in your industry, so you're trying to, plan your job search, and would they be open to maybe having a 5-10 minute chat with you? If you know them, you can ask if they know of any relevant openings for you, or even just to find out who the decision maker might be, who will hire someone like you. So just to give you an example of how I've done that yesterday, actually, a while ago, I had an interview with Microsoft for a contract role, and the interviews went well. I had 3 interviews and pretty much almost got the job, but then the location changed. So they wanted someone in Dublin or in Prague, and I wasn't willing to move. And I've seen someone who I am connected to on LinkedIn, but who I've never spoken to before, yesterday on LinkedIn, and sharing an opening in, it was a guy from Microsoft, like a global leadership recruiter, sharing an opening in the States. And obviously I'm not interested in the role in the States, but I messaged him and I kind of just say, I've seen you open to advertise this role. I've actually interviewed with Microsoft. I mentioned mention the name of the person, well, the people I've interviewed with, and asked, do you ever have openings like that in London? And I sent a nice, concise message, establishing some credibility with the previous interview. And I think the guy responded within an hour. He actually told me about the team structure, and he told me, he said, we don't have openings now, but, 2-3 months we might be. He gave me his boss's name. So, people are willing to help. So you just need to contact them. And in general, unless you know that person, don't ask them to help you find a job, especially in the first message. And don't just talk about yourself. Like, you want to ask the contact, to talk about himself or herself, and perhaps share with them some information about the industry. Social media. So the way in which employers hire is evolving, and employers increasingly are using social media to find candidates. So I, as a recruiter, I always use LinkedIn for all of my searches. So again, if you attended that workshop we ran several days ago on LinkedIn, I was teaching how you can optimize your LinkedIn profile to attract recruiters. So again, of course, use social media, but don't just basically apply for jobs online and kind of wait. Try to, like, whenever you apply for a job, just check them out a little bit more. Is there someone within a company who knows you, who you know, or is there anyone within a company that you have a connection in common with someone else? And try to just get some insider information, even just, try to find out who the hiring manager is. But yeah, you definitely need a strong social media presence. And yeah, I found LinkedIn very good, like in terms of quality of candidates. I know it depends what you do, because there will be some specific, job boards that are very specific to different industries. But just like for many different jobs I've been recruiting for, I found Indeed, Glassdoor, and LinkedIn were the best, and they would just really provide the best quality of candidates. Contacting employers directly. So that's what I mentioned. Like, not all of the jobs will be posted on LinkedIn. So if there are any specific companies that interest you, definitely keep an eye on their website. You can typically set up job search alerts. If you follow them on LinkedIn, you should be able. I'm actually not sure if you can set up LinkedIn job alert. I know you can. I'm just not sure if you can do it for a specific company, but you can definitely set up job search alerts for specific positions. So these jobs come to your to your inbox. Also, if someone actually asked me recently on a different webinar, if the job on LinkedIn is promoted, what does it mean? If it's promoted, it's actually good, because the company is paying extra to have the job visible to more people. So if that job is promoted, it's very likely that it's definitely live, and that the company is recruiting right now. So if you can't find who the hiring manager is, connect with recruiters directly. I know that not all recruiters are good, and I know that not everyone will respond. But if you have relevant experience, it's always good to connect with a recruiter and just keep in contact with them occasionally, even if they don't have any positions available. I used to recruit for Expedia for 4 years, and I would get a lot of people daily contacting me who were interested in Expedia. I mean, of course, sometimes they had no relevant experience, but there were a lot of candidates who were fantastic. We just didn't have a relevant position for them right now, but at that time. But then the people who built a relationship with me, they contacted me a month later and said, well, I've seen this job. Who's the recruiter? If I wasn't the recruiter myself, I would put them in contact with a relevant person. So it definitely makes sense to have some points of contacts in the companies that interest you. Staffing firms, recruitment consultancies can definitely be helpful, but recruitment consultants, they don't work for you. And I think that's the biggest misconception that job seekers sometimes have, is that, my recruitment consultant didn't find me a job. They don't work for you. They work for a client, which is the company who has asked them to find a specific person. So, they only get paid typically if it's a contingency recruiter, and they will only get paid if they place you as the candidate. So typically, unless you're like a perfect option, with you fulfill all of the requirements, typically you are not likely to find a job. Accident in there. Typically, you aren't likely to find a job through a recruitment agency. Same also, if you're changing careers, I think you're very unlikely to find a job through staffing firm, because they can find people like you themselves. I mean, like you know, who don't have the exact relevant experience. So, but they could be very useful. So it's a good idea to ask contacts if you haven't, you know, just who the best recruiters within your industry are. I would say it's not so much about the specific firm, because there could be a great firm with a really bad recruiter, or the other way around. You know, it could be like a not, you know, so recruitment consultancy, but you will have a really really great recruiter who will keep you updated. So it's definitely a good idea to do that. Again, I got a couple of my contracts through the same agency that I've worked with. I have a good relationship with them, and you know, definitely worth you know, building that. And again, talking about staffing firms, I also wanted to talk like how kind of not to connect with the recruiter, because a lot of the times I will get a message, not so much now during the COVID-19, but you know, before, like I would just get a random message. I am looking for, the person will mention a role. Do you have anything for me? And they will send a CV. You know, I wouldn't mind if the person actually read my profile and, you know, they know what company I'm recruiting for and what positions I'm recruiting for. And in that case, I will always help, or at least I will give some advice. But a lot of the time, the person clearly hasn't read my profile, because if they read my profile, they wouldn't be asking me about jobs in oil and gas or investment banking. You know, I've never recruited in those industries. I've had clients in those industries, coaching clients, but not, I've never recruited in those industries. So you don't want to send like a really generic message that's only about what you want. You do want to personalize it. If, for example, you know, we connected before, you might want to remind me how we've met, or you might have to, you know, remind the recruiter how they've met. And basically, like, don't make the recruiter do the work for you. You know, if there's any specific, if you are interested in a specific opportunity, you know, just send a very concise message about, you know, who you are, what you offer, what you're looking for, but just make sure you do that research. Just don't send those blanket emails. I can't tell you how many times I've received, and I'm amazed that people think it's a good approach. I would receive an email with, you know, a brief bio, a CV of a candidate who's sending the same email, and they're actually all on BCC, or, you know, onto like 20, 30 recruiters. I mean, that's just literally the best way to get your CV or your resume to get deleted. So, so yeah, you know, do personalize your messages. Whichever approach whoever you approach on LinkedIn, whether it's a recruiter or the hiring manager, you want to personalize your message. And also offer to help. You know, if it's a recruiter, you might want to offer to make a referral for another position. And if you're not sure how to help, you can just make a generic, you know, if I can help you in any way, do let me know. And, you know, advertising, that's, again, I'm not sure actually what percentage. I think that's, you know, maybe 20% advertising and staffing firms. So again, a lot of firms will advertise on LinkedIn, or a lot of firms actually, even if they're not on LinkedIn, they will be on Indeed and Glassdoor. Because from my experience, a lot of the applicant tracking systems through which you submit your application, they will automatically post the job on Indeed and Glassdoor. The only thing I've noticed is that, which is very confusing for job seekers, and I've had that problem myself as a job seeker, is that sometimes they will automatically repost after like 2 weeks or a month, I think, depending on the setup. So sometimes it might seem like it's a new position, but actually it's not. You know, it's already, maybe they're already on the final interview stage, but it's just being advertised as a new position. So that's why it's so important that you have a few different methods of job searching, that you just aren't relying on those online applications. Any questions on that? No? Okay.
Sorry, I've been job hunting for a while, and I just wanted to sort of understand the economics and sort of business model of some of the recruitment consultants, because I think it feels like some of them are just scanning the internet, finding jobs, and they're not actually paid by the company to find the job. They're just trying to find candidates and submit them and hopefully get paid.
Yeah, I'm afraid some of them are doing that. They shouldn't really be doing that. But I think, you know, now the whole, so, okay, normally how it works, right? And it's absolutely what you just described absolutely happens. But normally how recruitment agencies work is there are two models. The company is either retained by, the recruitment agency is either retained by the company. So that means they will get some money up front, and they are typically just, you know, the only exclusive agency that's looking for a candidate for a specific position. That honestly doesn't happen that much, because most people prefer not to pay up front. But that's, you know, that happens, and, you know, then they are reaching out to candidates. The most common way, and that's typically how I have worked with agencies as an internal recruiter, is that it will be based on contingency payment. So we will, you know, contact one or two agencies, and they will try to find the candidates, and they will only get paid once the person gets hired. So that's how it should work. But what you are saying is that the recruiters are posting jobs that aren't open. Honestly, I'm sure it happens, and unfortunately you can't prove that, but I'm sure it happens, especially right now. They're probably quite desperate because a lot of them have been put on furlough. They're probably worried about their livelihood. So, I have a friend who's looking for a job in project management, IT, some kind of IT project management. And I mean, she literally had like a few of those situations. She actually thought that she was interviewing for a live position. Clearly not, because suddenly recruiter kind of, disappeared. So very unfortunate situation. But if that happens, I would actually really try to find out, before you waste your time interviewing. I mean, if you're not working and, if you're not working right now and if you have time to talk to the recruiter, why not, right? You have nothing to lose. But if you're actually busy, I would definitely try to get some information about the client, like when are the interviews going to happen? When are they looking to hire? Ask about the onboarding. If you can't get answers to any of these questions, I would say that the job actually isn't live. They are just, trying to do some, and they should be just open about it, because I think there's nothing wrong. We as a recruiter, we do that. We do this pipelining, for future opportunities. But when I do that, I don't lie there is a job. I would just mention, I recruit in that specific area. We might have, we are interested in people with your background. Would you be open to having a chat about the company? But that's different to saying I have a job when you actually don't have a job. So I think I would just ask some more specific questions.
Thank you. That's great.
Okay. Okay. So I'm trying to move to the next slide, but it doesn't seem to. Okay, great. So I wanted just to talk about what recruiters are looking for on a resume, on a CV. And again, I mentioned I will show you a specific example of what what is it that we are looking for in general. So let's actually put that, I'll just give you, okay, that's fine. So, firstly, what the recruiters are looking for is the most recent role. So the first thing that employer or recruiters are looking for when they evaluate your CV is, does this person have the skills and experience necessary to come in and do the role successfully and start contributing to our efforts quickly. And the best way to do that is obviously to decide. I'm going to actually look at some of the notes so I don't forget. The best way to decide is just by looking at what you've accomplished for other employers, if you of course have work experience. So the first place really a recruiter is going to look at is your summary section and your experience section. So I would really recommend spending more time on that section than any other section on your CV. I would actually recommend that you have a summary section and a skills section. I will show you shortly what I mean by that. But when I look at the candidate's recent experience, but I'm trying to see, does this person have the right experience? Do they have the keywords that I mentioned on the job description? So you also want to mention that any kind of keywords listed on the job description, especially in terms of hard skills. I'm not talking about generic stuff like communication skills, because clearly you need it for every job. But if there are any, hard skills or specific, industry terms used on the job description, you want to make sure that that's on page 1 of your CV. So either in a summary section or in a key competency section. And also, when I look at the candidate's recent experience, I'm also trying out to figure out their status. So if they've only been with the company for 3 months, I'm like, it's probably not the best time for me to reach out. And also, if the candidate contacts me directly, why are they looking so soon? I mean, there could be legitimate reasons. I mean, it could be a contract or whatever. But in general, it's a bit of a red flag if someone is looking for a new job after just a few months. But really, the most important thing is is the most recent experience relevant to the position to which I'm hiring. Then the second one is company, and this is not necessarily kind of in the company recognition. It's not necessarily the most important, the second most important one, but it's important. So it's not just that some companies are better than others, although some of them certainly are better than others. It's purely a matter of how quickly I can assign a frame of reference. So it's also work known as credibility. So for example, for me, recruiting in the technology sector, if someone has worked for, say, Amazon, I probably, mind you, most people working there, they're not that happy, but you probably used to working at large scale projects and at a very fast pace. Maybe you have worked at a very well-known startup, like a crash and burn startup. So you've probably worn many hats and are used to working at the sprinter space. So there are some pretty blatant associations that recruiters who've been recruiting in a specific sector for a while can make just by looking at the companies that you have been working for. So we just kind of notice patterns and trends amongst candidates from certain companies. Of course, these assumptions can fail us, but we are talking about a CV review, which is honestly several seconds. Like no one will spend 5 minutes reading your CV. It is actually just several seconds. So assigning that frame of reference could be, it's more difficult if you work for some kind of obscure company. So not necessarily a problem, but if you work for a company that's maybe not well known, I would just maybe add one line under the company about what the company is doing and maybe the size of the company or something. Then the overall experience, your kind of story and career progression. So we look at, is there a career progression? Does this person have increasing levels of responsibility? Do the titles make sense? If you are a VP of marketing or finance for a 5-people company, well, that's very different to being a VP of marketing in a multinational organization. And do the responsibilities match what I'm looking for? And also, like, I'm looking at the dates of employment and how long you've been with each employer. If you had a lot of short-term positions, I would probably mention, if it was a contract, I would definitely mention it was a contract. If you are made redundant, maybe just mention that. If it happens just once or twice, it's fine. But if you have like a few short-term contracts, a lot of recruiters and hiring managers won't actually even consider you because they just think that you're a job hopper. So if you have legitimate reasons, as in, the company moved to a different location, or, there was just a massive redundancy, I would actually maybe mention that on your CV. Also, try to show progression wherever you can within companies and when changing within companies. So even if you have received just a slight upgrade, so maybe you advance from sales associate or to senior sales associate, I would mention that. So I think someone raised their hands, Alison's phone. Is there a question there?
Oh, sorry,
No?
I was muted. I just wanted to ask about short-term positions, because I'm a trailing spouse, although I hate that term. And so the longest I've ever stayed in a job is 3 years, and 20 years of career, that's starting to look like chopping and changing. Although I know in some other kind of industries, that's kind of the norm.
Yeah.
Should you explain if you've done a lot of expat moves, and if so, how and where? Or does it, I'm in education, you see, and lots of people stay put in education. They don't move every 3 years.
You know what, it's without seeing your CV, I can't actually tell you exactly, but 3 years in general, I think that's fine. I'm more talking about like 7 months here, 9 months there, less than a year. Honestly, 3 months, I think it's fine. You can, I don't think you need to, if you stayed in jobs for like 3 years or more, I honestly don't think you need to explain the reasons during the interview. I don't think that's, I know that certain industries are different, but 3 years, I think it's a solid amount of time in one.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think you have to worry about that, in my opinion. You can explain different reasons during the interview. Then, okay, gaps. So I don't mind gaps as long as there's a sufficient explanation, because maybe you took a couple of years off to raise a family, or try to start your own company. That's fine. It's just if you don't have anything that makes me wonder. I mean, who knows? We could have been in prison, right? there's nothing on your CV for like 2 or 3 years. Like, it's good to mention that. I mean, sometimes just people mention, like women mention family break, or they spoke to candidates who just try to set up their own business and try to do something different. So and if you have big gaps in employment or some kind of unusual career progression, it's not necessarily a deal breaker. I mean, for some people it will be, but I would recommend addressing that in a cover letter. So just, try to make your work history as clear as possible, be upfront about addressing any red flags or, unusual moves with the recruiter that you're working with, or otherwise they might not feel comfortable with forwarding your CV to the hiring manager. Then the keywords, so, do you have the experience I'm looking for? So that's what I was saying earlier. If there are any specific keywords on the job description, specifically in terms of hard skills, make sure that's on your CV, like really emphasize it in your, key core competencies section maybe. Like if I'm looking for a JavaScript engineer, I would clearly look for someone who worked as a JavaScript engineer. If I am looking for, I don't know, commercial salesperson, I would expect to see those keywords on the CV as well. Then the overall organization, I just mean like, spelling and grammar, and Grammarly is a great tool to check your spelling, ease of use, ability to clearly present ideas. If you, I've seen people who put that attention to detail, it's one of the main skills, and then they have 2 spelling mistakes in the summary section. It's a little bit concerning. And personal online footprint, again, that's not required, especially more in some industries than in others. If you're a graphic designer, then sure, you will have a link to your portfolio. But if you have online footprint and you've included that on your CV, like, we are going to click on that, whether it's your Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever. Just make sure. I mean, I have to say, I personally don't actually bother like checking what has the candidate posted on Twitter or Facebook, but actually some hiring managers really do that. I've seen situations when it's actually quite recently, last year, my friend is a recruiter in a pretty big company, and they had a guy on interview for, I think it was like a communications director position. It was a pretty senior position, PR or communications director. The guy was already on a final interview stage, but she just had this feeling that something was off, So she decided to do some research, and oh my God, she basically found pictures of this guy, like pretty much half naked, like, if just from some parties, like just very unprofessional pictures, him like completely drunk, etc. What you do in your spare time is your business, but make sure that if you put pictures like that online, which really you shouldn't, but if you do that, make sure that your settings are set to private. So basically the guy didn't get the job because of what he had put online. And I have seen another situation with a hiring manager in another company I was recruiting for. And again, I don't bother looking at people's Twitter. I generally don't have the time when I work in recruitment, but the hiring manager did. And he didn't like, he basically thought that the candidate's tweets made him seem quite immature. So guess what? He didn't get a job because of that. So, you just never know who you're dealing with. Just whatever you put out there, just would you be happy with a potential hiring manager? I mean, you can absolutely share your personality. I think it's great, but just whatever you put out there, just make sure that you'll be happy for your potential employer, or your grandmother to see that. So just make sure that, anything that's kind of maybe less professional, that you set your settings to private. Okay, so in general, what you need to remember, employers don't buy skills, they buy solutions. And that's why it's so important that you present yourself as a problem solver, both at an application stage and also during the interview. So when you look at these 2 examples here, won't be reading them, but the one on the left, it's really just a feature, right? Like seasoned project manager, identifying, solving problems. Anyone can say that. But when you look at the second example on the right, you have, you can see some tangible achievements. So I'm not saying that your achievements have to be quite as big as maybe the ones in this example, but you do need to really increase your chances of getting interviews, and then increasing your chances of getting an offer. You really need to quantify your experience. You need to provide evidence of success, right? So like, ask yourself, what were you hired to do? What did you do? What was the result? And see how you can quantify that. So, a lot of people actually struggle with that because they think, oh, it's easy if you work in sales. You can say that, well, you've made 120% of your target, or you made extra amount of, certain amount of money. But I find that a lot of job seekers struggle with that idea of quantifying their experience. So, you can see some examples here. Maybe you won the title of Best Employee of the Year, or you've introduced some system which reduced file retrieval time by 40%. It doesn't have to be quite as much. I mean, if you don't have a concrete number, that's fine. You can just gauge that. But, try to have some numbers on your CV. I'm not saying that every bullet point on your CV needs to be a number. No, I think it's impossible for many jobs. But just like, ask yourself, how can you, why are you better than other candidates? Like, what's the evidence of your success? So let me actually give you some examples here of how you can do that if you don't work in sales, or, you don't work in marketing. So there are 3 easy ways to quantify your experience. So the first one is show how many. And again, see this example. So the first one is pretty much the kind of thing I see on many CVs, like ensured compliance with filing of annual forms, right? I mean, nothing wrong with that, but again, that's one of the biggest mistakes, that the CV is very duty oriented. When you look at the second one, you can see, ensured compliance with filing of 75 annual forms, and you can see, how many different company departments. So what does it tell you? I mean, which one is more impressive, right? Clearly the second one, because at least if the person is doing 75 annual forms, at least it tells me something about their, the organizational skills, I suppose. Another one, I was working with some social workers, and they were like, oh, how can I quantify my experience? But I'm like, okay, well, how many cases are you working on each month? And, it turns out that most of them were working on like 50 cases per month and, successfully closing, say 20. I don't remember what the number was, but I'm like, that's the number that you can use on a CV to make yourself stand out. Okay. Another one is you can show how much. So again, another examples. Anyone can say save money by finding ways to cut costs. But the second example, you can actually see what the specific saving was. Yes, does it make sense? It's just much more impressive if you have something like that. It just sounds a lot more impressive. Now, you don't have to have, as I mentioned, you don't need to have like an exact number, but estimates are fine. But you just need to justify your claim when someone asks you about it in an interview. And I think I had one more. Sorry. Show how often. So even if you are in a job that's like, secretary or administrative assistant, it can sound completely different if you added some context. So for example, answered phones at the front desk, or manage switchboard with 10 incoming lines, routing 500 calls per day. Wouldn't you hire the second candidate? And, this stuff I've just shared about ways to quantify your experience. I have an article on my blog. If you go to interview, honestly, just put it in Google, how to quantify your experience, Margaret Buj, and you will find the article. So how to quantify your experience and my name, and you will find this article on my blog because I give these examples there. So as you write your CV and, as you send your application, just ask yourself these important questions like how many, how much, how often. And the key to landing an interview, or at least increasing your chances, is to answer those questions as you describe your previous professional accomplishments. So in general, how you create achievements on your CV, and that's really the stuff that you need for your interview technique as well, right? Like for any interview, you should have some stories prepared of achievements and challenging situations and influencing and maybe dealing with a difficult stakeholder or negotiating or working under pressure, whatever the job is. So, that's the structure you would use, the STAR or the PAR, so problem, action, result, or the situation, action, result. But at an application stage, you're obviously not going to have a full long example on your CV, but it can help you create those like statements with some numbers, right? So think of like, what were the problems? What was the context? Like maybe within a tight time frame or during a major organization. What did you do and what were the business results of your action? So you see the example below, that will be an amazing bullet points to put on your CV. Okay, so that's actually a great CV example that in terms of, the structure that I would recommend. So you might want to put the targeted job title. It's a great idea to have a summary section and core competency section, or just one of those. Because that's really these are the sections that you will optimize, you can change it depending on a specific position. When I talk about tailoring your CV to specific position, you're obviously not going to be changing entire CV, but because they can look at your LinkedIn profile and see, does it actually align, is it the same? But look at like a few lines, what are your most important kind of qualities, what are your most important areas of expertise? So, this is really the area, the summary section where you will mention what you can bring to the role and what your main areas of expertise are. If you are changing careers, you can just mention, make it clear that you're looking to switch industries and make it clear what your transferable skills are. The core competency section, these will really assist with the keyword optimization and scanning. So as I mentioned earlier, if there are any specific skills on the job description that you have, I would definitely put them here in a bullet point format. And then for every job, try to have some achievements. As I said, I know you don't need to have, it's not that every bullet point needs to be achievement driven, but don't put words like responsible for, duties included. I mean, that's boring. That's not going to make you stand out. So like ask yourself, how do I know that I've done a good job? And then describe what good job look like. Or, how did you save money or made money or streamline the process or how did you positively contribute to in any way to the culture or to the organization, and be specific. You can also ask yourself, like, why was my manager happy with my work? What did your work colleagues come to you for? And yeah, don't like, ideally start each bullet point with action verb, like manage, led, evaluated. Don't start with responsible for or duties included. And they should be quite brief, just like 1 to 3 lines long, not like really long paragraphs. That's quite hard to read. Yeah, what's the time actually? Because I think what's the time right now?
6:45.
Okay, wow, okay, I have to hurry up, so okay, fine. So how do you tailor your resume to each position? So firstly, let me just put that here. Okay. So firstly, it's really important that you understand what the company is looking for, because when I know it sounds extremely basic, but when you're applying for many jobs on a daily basis or weekly basis, it's easy to assume that the positions are just similar enough, and you can just send your CV if the position has the same title. However, it's a major mistake, because what one company calls account manager or marketing manager can actually mean different things in different organizations. So I know it's, again, sounds basic, but really read the entire advert. Don't just like send your CV without double checking that you have highlighted all of your relevant experience. It's always better that you send fewer applications, but that you tailor them to specific positions, rather than this like spray and pray approach and sending your resume to any job that's kind of vaguely relevant. So take a few minutes to understand the job requirements, compare them with your CV, and imagine that you were the recruiter for the position, and reading your CV for the first time. So does it match up with the job specification? And can you immediately see the key requirements of the job on your CV? And if not, maybe you need to move some information around, or put them in a summary section or core competencies section, or you need to add some skills and knowledge that you've left out. Now, you won't always tick every box for a vacancy, and that's fine. But I guess it depends what that is, because if you miss the main requirements, then forget it. You won't ever get an interview. But if it's if you're missing certain experience or knowledge from the requirements, you need to be creative and just think about similar experiences or transferable skills that you can highlight on your CV to ensure that it still looks like a good fit on paper. So that the whole CV tailoring, it doesn't have to take that long. It's not about changing the whole CV. It could be just adding one line to your summary section, or maybe adding an extra line and removing one line from your, work experience section, to make sure that it's just the most relevant stuff. Don't apply for jobs for which you aren't qualified for. So you do need to fulfill, unfortunately, most of the requirements. It's not to say that you have to have 100% of the requirements, no, but you do need to have most of them. So just to give you some examples, I used to recruit for German speakers or Swedish speakers for some jobs, and guess what? Honestly, like only 10% of the people who applied actually spoke the languages. So if you see the as an example, language requirement as a second requirement, and you don't have it, then just don't waste your time and recruiters' time, because you won't get any interview. But at the same time, don't think you need to have 100% of the requirements, because the job description is typically written with a perfect candidate in mind, and they might not be able to find the perfect candidate. So there's just a fine balance, applying for jobs for which you have experience, but you don't need to have 100% of the experience. And
can I just ask about that?
Yeah.
If you're sort of looking to change or diversify your career, so often jobs are kind of knowledge based or kind of experience based rather than skills based. So how do you turn job description or advert that might be asking for knowledge or experience that you don't have into something skills based?
It's hard for me to answer that without seeing exactly what the job is, and feel free to contact me later. We can have a discussion offline. But if there's a lot of specific knowledge and experience you don't have, you probably won't get an interview. Because like if like in general, when I'm looking as a recruiter, when the hiring managers are looking for someone, it's nice to have transferable skills, but when you have 5 other people who have actually done the job, like, guess what? They're gonna get the interview first. So I think it's just a balance. If you don't have all of the experience, you can emphasize the experience you have. You can make sure you have achievements that are relevant to the role, and add the transferable skills. If you don't have any of the experience that they are looking for, honestly, you won't get the interview. you're very unlikely unless you maybe get it through networking.
Mm.
So it's just that fine balance. But
Yeah.
happy to touch you later, and based on your specific situations.
Thank you.
I just realized we still have, almost there, but I know it's getting late. Another one, cut down on irrelevant information. So the information you omit from your CV could be just as important as the information that you include. So if you have large sections of your CV, being filled up with skills and knowledge that are not mentioned in the job ads, just remove it. Like I've seen CVs that the person has clearly put, especially someone quite experienced, they've worked for 15, 20 years, they've literally put in like every single thing they've done. Yeah, they have great skills, but it's like you want to tailor that to a specific job. So if there are some skills that literally have zero relevance to the job, why keep them on your CV? You can have like maybe one master version of your CV, and then you can tailor that to specific opportunities. So you can just cut down those sections slightly. You don't need to remove them completely. You can just remove the level of detail that you include to make sure that you have time to include the skills that are being asked for in job adverts. So, for example, if your work history from several years ago is completely different to the industry that you're currently working in and progressing in, then it's okay to cut down your previous roles, especially like 10 years and plus, to just like one-line summaries, as your current target employers will not want to read about them in great detail. So you can just have the name of the employer, dates, and like literally one-line summary. So, it really, like, tailoring your CV for every application does take a bit of time and effort, but it will really pay off, as your application will be of great standard. Like, it will basically increase your chances of getting an interview. And the final one here is highlight your specific accomplishments. So, you really want to answer the questions that employer will have in mind, like how have you solved my problem, or how can you improve my organization? And you want to outline your achievements and how you've done it for your current or previous employer. And as I was saying, start each bullet point on your CV with action verbs, right? So don't have this responsible for, duties included. You can just have, managed, led, evaluated, whatever the words would be. Ideally you want to add size and scope of the environment to place the achievements in their context. So, let's say you're a project manager and, you've managed projects with the budget of between 30 and 50 million, you might want to put that on your CV. So you want to quantify your achievements with measurable components wherever possible. And you also want to use action verbs to tell your story with impact. So for example, tripled revenue, or constructed, or led, or, created campaign, whatever, and also use present tense with the current role and past tense verbs for previous positions, right? So like lead, in the current position, and led in the previous position. So actually, we are pretty much at the end, which is great. So I'll open up the questions. If you are, I've got actually a couple of kind of free things for anyone who's interested. So firstly, I have a free video course. It's a 5-day video course, which will show you simple strategies. So I've noticed you is missing from you. Just the strategies you can use to sell yourself effectively in job interviews and mistakes to avoid. So there are 5 videos, and I talk about how to discover the needs of the hiring manager, like what questions you can ask the hiring manager during the interview. I talk about the interviewing techniques, about mistakes people make, when applying for jobs and when interviewing, and there's a whole video on salary negotiation as well. So yeah, that's just free. You can just sign up on youarehiredvideocourse.com. And if like I know some of you had questions related to your specific position. I couldn't really tell you. It's hard to answer without looking at your specific CV and seeing the job description. So if anyone has any questions, just answer a few questions on talkwithmargaret.com. Let me know when you're free for a chat, and ideally send me your, actually no, you can't send your CV through the form, but yeah, send me, answer a few questions there. I'll get in contact with you, and I can answer any of your questions there. And also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I do post loads of articles and videos on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, it just will be Margaret, just Margaret Buj. Here are all my details, so it's just Margaret Buj everywhere on Twitter and YouTube and LinkedIn. So it's really easy to find. I don't think there's another Margaret Buj. So any questions? Am I on time? Because I can't see the time. Am I?
Yes, you are. You are.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
So, any questions?
I'm wondering about the length of the CV and also the cover letter, whether you have any ideas on what's appropriate.
Great question. Yeah, great question. And thank you for asking. Forgot to cover that one. In terms of the CV, I would say, 2 pages, maybe 3 at the most. I think if you have a lot of experience, and again, I know it depends on your industry, right? Because if you are in university and you have a lot of academic papers, I do understand those CVs are longer. But just in, maybe in medical professions, those CVs are longer. But for most corporate jobs, I would really try to do it in 2 pages, maximum 3. I've seen, mind you, mostly from other countries, not from the UK, but I've seen CVs that are like 7 to 11 pages. I mean, do you honestly think that anyone will read that? No. So yeah, I would say 2 to 3 pages. You want to be concise, you don't need to mention every single thing you've ever done. And also for the last, I would really focus on the last 10, 15 years, if relevant. And the previous positions, you can just have like an earlier career history and, just the dates and titles. You don't really need the information of what you did 20 years ago. I mean, not you specifically, for all of us. Cover letter, again, it depends. If it's kind of a corporate job, I would honestly say just a half a page. No one will have the time to read like a really long cover letter. Really, the cover letter should be just, encourage them to read the CV. But again, not everyone will even read the other cover letters. I think the cover letter should just mention some of your key achievements and why you're suitable for the position. So I would say half a page is absolutely fine. You just mention why you're interested in the role. This is what you can bring. A few paragraphs or a few bullet points and call to action, like we look forward to hearing from them. But I know it varies, right? Because there are people who work within local governments or civil service, and they have to write like a proper personal statement. So that's different, right? So this typically you really need to address every point on the job description, and that's going to be a lot longer. I've seen those personal statements being like 2 or 3 pages A4, but that I don't really consider that a cover letter. So if it's a cover letter, honestly, I think half a page A4, maybe 3/4 is the absolute maximum.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Anything else? Okay, all right, there are no more questions. Then I guess thank you so much for attending. Hope that you found it useful. And yeah, if anyone wants a free consultation about their specific situation, just answer a few questions on talkwithmargaret.com, and you've got the access to the free video course as well.
Thank you so much, Margaret. It was really, really insightful, and I hope you all actually enjoyed it as much as I did, and I wish you all a very nice evening, a very nice dinner for some. And
we've got salary negotiation a week from now, right?
Yes, we've got plenty more seminars coming up. So next week with Margaret as well. So don't forget to check our website, focusinfouk.org, and have a great evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Bye, Katie.